Welcome aboard the Limbus Company book tour, a tourist ride in which we drive through the story of the game, while yours truly tells you all about how the writing references real-life literature, including not just the books that each scenery is based on, but also the lives of their authors, Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, or other trivia when appropriate. If you only joined us now, that's weird and kinda destroys the framing device of this video series, so please go watch the previous one, a link is in the description. As for everyone else, I hope you used your break productively. I don't want to hear that you need to use the toilet 5 minutes after we depart. As per usual, this video assumes you know about the plot of the game, and I reserve the right to liberally mention fragments of other Project Mu series, like the previous games or web novels. No complaining about the spoilers, please. Before we start the engine, I need to apologize for two things I got wrong last time. First of all, that one scene of Gregor with a normal arm is clearly a reflection in a train window, so my point about it looking unchanged is moot. I guess I'm a vampire and I don't know how mirrors work. Second of all, despite my incredibly strong belief that Cromer heard the voice before her transformation, the dialogue is nowhere to be found in the game. So her transformation isn't technically a distortion, just her becoming a physical manifestation of the sin of lust because of the golden bow shenanigans. My sincere apologies for these mistakes, and I hope they never happen again. Well, we've waited long enough. Hit it, Karen! The Intervallo serve as mini-chapters. The name is Italian for, well, an interval, a range of time, a gap, a break. As such, they do not follow the structure of Divine Comedy like the Canto chapters do, serving as side quests on the company's journey through hell. Still, they are important to the character development of the cast, even if in small ways, so we do need to at least look at them while we drive by to acknowledge elements that will come up later. The first such distraction on the gang's path is Hell's Chicken. While still in the K-Corp nest and awaiting contact with the person to guide them to another golden bow, the gang comes across a fried chicken restaurant with an owner that distorted, which also serves as the formal introduction of the phenomenon for the Limbus-only players, remembering which could have saved me from some embarrassment in the previous video. Either way, the guy turned into a huge chicken man, he keeps spawning raw poultry that takes over the minds of the people like Half-Life facehuggers, and our merry band is dragged into the whole ordeal by a guy named Samjo. First with a well-aimed rock thrown at the soldiers of Apocalypse, and later with a promise of a lifetime voucher for free KFC. Throughout the whole chapter, the team mentions a few instances of eating rancid food, so it makes you wonder how dire the food supplies are inside Mephistopheles. Someone good at budgeting, please help me. I spent 7 trillion An on this cool bus and now my employees are dying of starvation. We'll get back to Samjo in the Canto proper, so let's focus on the Intervallo for now. Its name is, of course, a play on Hell's Kitchen, an infamous reality TV series about a British man helping failing restaurants with the power of hatred. So of course the team has to make a chicken dish to satisfy the distortion, who is a very strict judge. Though it probably doesn't help that most of the seniors have more experience in committing war crimes than with cooking. Another reference is the fact that the chain restaurant that pushed Chicken Man out of business is called Bodhisattva Chicken, with Bodhisattva being someone on the path to becoming a Buddha. This is most likely due to the fact that their chicken is a genetic freak with several wings, and having multiple arms is a common theme in Buddhism when portraying someone on the path to enlightenment. It's also just really funny to me that nothing is sacred in the city, so why not name your brand Crucifixion Fried Chicken? The restaurant at the center of the story is called Jungbong's, after the chicken man's mother, but I couldn't find out why Otis calls it Taki before learning of the origin. Yongbong is a common name given to mountains in Korea, but I couldn't find a translation in my cursory search that would explain Grandma's distaste towards the name. Is it just that it's like calling your restaurant Pig Chicken? Korean speakers, please let me know, cause this is such a small detail but it's driving me crazy. I like that this breather is used to show us some character development from Sinclair, who stands up for himself for probably the first time in his life by refusing to take conflicting orders from other sinners, even if his body language is not quite there yet. Also, we get Merceau being so disgusted after a taste test that he turns into a rap god, so you know there's a lot going on in his head, he just doesn't vocalize it. And we get introduced to the idea of a concept incinerator here, which, just like Samjo, will be discussed in more detail on our next stop. The chapter ends with Otis' rough attitude and shameless bootlicking reminding Papa Bongi of his mother, the team entering his mind and beating the shit out of him until he remembers that his mom preferred pizza, so basing his entire life on making chicken she would like was pretty stupid of him. And rather than infinite food, the team gets paid in a marketable plushie. Faust says something about the distortion phenomenon being based on a person's sense of right and wrong, before simplifying it to being about a worldview, but who cares what that nerd says? I'm sure I won't have a sudden revelation by connecting this to another adventure connected to another mutated animal. Before we go on, we also need to acknowledge the 3-part mini-story that happens right after the Intervallo. We get an in-universe reason for Dante keeping a little glossary to refresh your memory after you come back to the game after a few months, but more importantly, we receive a confirmation about some details regarding Mephistopheles. It's bigger on the inside, and a part of it is an infinitely continuing space known as the Corridor. This technology was previously seen in Leviathan, used by the Ring Syndicate as a way of connecting their facilities. The basic gist of how it works is that you will only find your way through it if you have a map in your head, knowledge of where you left from and where your destination is. It's a liminal space, a whole bunch of nothing between the important things. Makes you wonder why the company has access to and openly uses something that a finger employed to keep their secrets. This is also where I would start bitching about how the last few chapters of Leviathan still don't have an official translation, but considering that apparently it's stuck in a legal dispute between the artist of the comic book parts and Project Moon, I don't think there's anything to be done but grumble until that's sorted out one way or another. Anyway, we're on a book tour, let's get reading. The next layer of hell that Dante and Virgil enter is one where those punished for the sin of gluttony reside. So of course, the journey takes us to a K-Corp laboratory where chickens are endlessly mutilated and healed to produce endless meat for the consumption needs of the city. The punishment for this sin is an endless ice-cold rain beating upon them while they wallow in an even colder sludge of mud. Thus we have the origin story of K-Corp's singularity described as a rain of healing tears that came from a star, and if not refined properly, the same healing technology can dissolve people into goop. In the poem, this layer is guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed beast. Appropriately, there are three antagonistic forces driven by a hollow, insatiable appetite in Limbus. Dongrang, craving constant rewards and recognition, no matter how empty. Dongbe and her Technology Liberation Alliance, seeking revenge and technological regression in an impossible quest to bring back the past. And finally the K-Corp and its executives at large, demanding more and more production of the healing tears. I think it's going to be the easiest for me to tackle these heads one by one for clarity. K-Corp was founded by a woman named Stephanette, who ventured into the lands beyond the city's outskirts, where she met a nameless boy whose wish was granted by some unknown power. He became a star like in the children's story, with its tears curing all ailments of the body. Stephanette took the newly formed singularity and made it cry by telling it heartwarming stories, trying to be ethical under hypercapitalism and all that. Of course, the moment she died, the entire executive suite started murdering each other, and when the dust settled, a woman named Alfonso became the top dog and decided that it's much more efficient to torture the being with images of horrible things. The names of both the original and current CEO point to the inspiration being a short story called The Stars by Alphonse Daudet, in which a nameless, poor shepherd pines over a lady named Stephanette, the daughter of his master, beautiful and kind. Due to circumstances, she stays the night at his little shack and becomes fascinated with how clearly the stars are visible at the hills compared to her home. It ends on the shepherd happily telling her about the different constellations as she falls asleep on his arm, as if another star rested on his shoulder. It's a sweet, slightly melancholic story, just like the glimpse we get into Limbus Stephanette's life. And real-life Alphonse Daudet was a monarchist that spent his life hating the French Republic, and that is why Alfonso is an iron-fisted queen of the K-Nest, willing to record her own subjects dying in agony and order assassinations of her own employees to ensure survival of the company. Or at least that's the best connection I can draw between the two. Slight tangent, but when I was looking for an audiobook version of The Stars on YouTube, most hits I got were from small Korean channels, including a Minecraft recreation. Suffice to say, I think a translation of the story may be somewhat well known there, which is how it found its way into Limbus. So that's neat. In order to look the other two heads of the Cerberus in the eye, we need to discuss the real-life inspiration behind the characters, a Korean group known as Guino, or the League of Nine. Founded in 1933, while the country was under the Japanese occupation, the group is a core element of Korean literary identity, despite only surviving until the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. For context of the broad situation surrounding the group's writing, another similar artistic association, Korea Artista Proleta Federatio, or KAPF for short, had its members arrested by the occupying force back in 1931 and was forcibly dissolved in 1935 for their anti-imperialist, pro-socialist writing. They were not exactly on friendly terms with the League. The two groups were often writing critiques of the output of the other, but my point is that artists had to tread lightly in that political landscape. In comparison, Guineau was not united by a political ideology outside of the initial opposition to the imperialist occupation, but was more of a loose ensemble promoting the love of art for its own sake and advocating creative freedom. In Limbus, the same sentiment is carried, with some changes. Rather than writers, the League of Nine are technological inventors, still united by the love of creation for the sake of creation, largely refusing to use their inventions for financial gain, even as that ideal is eroded over time by the need to earn money to survive, like a tracking technology initially developed to help parents find their lost children, used to monitor the actions of factory workers. Similarly, rather than a native population under foreign occupation, the League in Limbus are refugees from S-Corp. Due to political turbulence, they moved to T-Corp's domain to conduct their research, only to find themselves under their watchful eye, investigated and ultimately targeted by T-Corp itself. As T-Corp is visually quite clearly inspired by Britain between late 19th and early 20th century, the Guineaux still find themselves under a symbol of colonial imperialism, even in a world contained into a single city, where no district can reasonably expect to invade another one for territorial conquest. As the name suggests, the real-life group had 9 members at all times, but the total number is 14 due to people leaving and others joining. Some of these were artistic disagreements, some were folks voicing support for the Empire of Japan, which was considered, as kids would say, pretty cringe for an association promoting the freedom of arts. The other thing that is cringe is the fact that there seems to be no consensus on how Korean is transliterated into the Latin alphabet. I got used to calling the inspiration for singer number 1 Yi-san, but some articles from the Academy of Korean Studies translate his pen name as Lee-san. Other names are sometimes written Kim, but sometimes Gim. Wikipedia has different spellings of the same name in the same article because people just copy the sources and nobody cares to keep them consistent. So if I make any mistakes with the pronunciation going forward, please point them out, but also please understand. I would also like to thank the Reddit user Owl of June for a thread assigning the real-life writers to their fictional counterparts, making the whole ordeal of sorting this out much easier for me. For full clarity's sake, I am not going to go through each of the 14 authors one by one to preserve my sanity. I will come back to the group if any members show up in person in the story. Right now, let's just focus on the key players. The loosely defined leader of the League in Limbus is called Brother Yongji by the other members, and he is based on one of the 2 founders of Guineau, the novelist Yi Jongmyong. The information on the real-life guy is rather sparse. Even his Korean Wikipedia page is rather terse, only describing his writing as individualistic and romantic. The article on Encyclopedia of Korean Culture is a bit more in-depth, saying that his works are mostly regarded as rather lacking in depth and humorous, a way of providing escapism from the harsh reality. That fits into the portrayal of the fictional Brother Yongji, who creates the technology of a glass window, allowing people to view a different reality through it, like a world in which a butterfly lives happily, while in the real world it is just a dead husk. Another parallel to the author is Brother Yongji suddenly disappearing. The real-life Yi Jongmyong has no date of death specified in any articles about him, because he vanished after 1936, now presumed to have died during the Korean War. Heck, we don't even have the birth date of the guy. The Limbus character has one more thing going for him, however. The photo depicting him standing in front of the other members of the League has his face obstructed by something. It's never remarked upon, and he is remembered by the other inventors, so the idea of him was not completely erased. But it definitely is weird how his face is just obstructed like that. And I'm sure that the window would be appreciated by an organization trying to account for all contingencies, so maybe he found employment somewhere and got his identity stricken out of all records as part of the job contract. Definitely something to keep an eye out for in the future Cantos. The personal warmth of Brother Young-ji and his technology of the window, combined with the rather unpleasant end of the league having their doors kicked in by the cops, has led to 3 very divergent inspirations for the key actors of this canto. First, we of course need to talk about the one that became a sinner, one of the 12 playable characters of Limbus Company, Yi-san. The inspiration behind him is the best known member of the Guino, Kim Hae-gyong, who used Yi-san as a pen name. His most known works include the short story Wings, which served as the basis for writing Limbus Yi-san's story, and the poetry anthology Crow's Eye View, which is the name given to the ego he has unlocked by default. Both the character and the real author are rather gloomy, distant and difficult to understand the intentions of. Probably the best example of this is Crow's Eye View. The anthology was supposed to have 30 poems, but stopped at 15 after constant complaints that it's incomprehensible. The very first poem in it has no spacing at all, making it almost impossible to discern where one word ends and another begins. Bird's eye view is an idiom used to describe looking at something from a distance above it and seeing it in full, but the generic bird was replaced with a crow, often associated with death and bad omens. But because of these traits, not in spite of them, Yi-san's writing has endured to this day and is a part of Korean national identity in art. Just look up Limbus clips focused on the fictional Yi-san and look for Korean comments which after translation refer to the character as my ancestor rather than by name. Within the fiction of Limbus, Yi-san created a refinement of the window technology called the mirror. Rather than observing a different reality for whatever it was pointed at, it allowed for reflection. For a person to see themselves in a different world through it. Not just see either, but to also communicate with that other possible self. On a meta level, this is how we get our gacha pulls, our main cast gaining the power to temporarily become a different version of themselves, though seemingly always destined to be co-workers with the other team members. On the level of the fiction itself, it's an obviously world-altering technology, if applied correctly, and the focal point of the actions of many characters, such as the Ring in Leviathan trying to use the mirrors in their own artistic pursuits. In relation to reality, it's a refinement of a creation made by the League's creator. Just like in our reality, Yi-san is the best-known member of the Guino despite not being a part of the original 9. He joined in 1934, a year after the group was formed. In this way, Yi-san represents the ideals of the League moving forward, iterating and changing. Of course, his story in this canto reflects this in many more ways, but we will get to that in a bit, in fragments. He is the main character here, he's not going anywhere. But before we move on, a bit of trivia I couldn't fit anywhere else. Both real and fictional Yi-san found themselves working as an architect for their oppressor, be it as a public official for the Occupational Government General of Korea, or as a factory designer for T-Corp. In both cases, he found recognition and success in this line of work. The second path for the ideals of the League is portrayed by Dongbek, the leader of the Technology Liberation Alliance, a reactionary group aiming to destroy the many creations of the city that they deem harmful and stifling to their freedom, targeting the K-Corp steel production as the inciting incident for the story in this chapter. The group does not have a united ideological front as portrayed by the secondary characters. Ran is basically Unabomber, claiming that dependence on things like tears made us worse, as people who cannot afford them are abandoned when they lose a limb, rather than cared for. She is also ready to die for the struggle. Shren only followed suit due to the quite obvious love for Ran and gave up, ready to spill the beans when her initial plan of poisoning the sinners with unrefined tears didn't work, only to get sliced up by she assassins before she said too much. Nico and his Rose Spanner workshop goons only followed suit for the money, not interested in the ideology of their employer at all. And I don't know what Mariel's deal is. I think he's just a doomer ready to see the world burn after not getting a job in any of the nests. Either way, it's made clear that the group at large was used as means to an end by Dongbek, who did not care about the use of technology in the city at large, but about revenge. Someone betrayed the League and forever stained the most beautiful memories of her life, and she would do anything to take revenge, as hollow as it is. She knows that killing her old companions and destroying their life's work would not bring the past back, but she cannot see any other path for her life. If Yi-sang is the symbol of moving forward despite it seeming impossible, Dongbek is the movement backward, just as improbable as its counterpart. She is a unique case among the cast, as she is not named after a pen name of any real-life author, but a creation of one. Dongbek is the Korean name for camellia flowers and the title of a short story by another member of the League, Kim Yoo-jong. That author was very close with the real-life Yi-san. The article The Writing Community of Guino even mentions in passing that he outright loved Kim, but frankly I am not comfortable speculating about the feelings of real-life people that I only learned of because of a video game, so let's just leave it at that for the purpose of this video. What I can factually repeat is the fact that the two of them had a suicide pact with each other, but it didn't happen. Tuberculosis did both of them in instead. So any way you slice it, there was a level of familiarity between them that allowed for such an idea to even occur in the first place. Definitely more than just fellow club members. And in the fiction of Limbus, there seemed to be some buried tenderness between the two inventors as well. Both of them die in each other's arms at different points of the story, though Yi-san gets better because of Dante's clocktacular meddling. This story is quite short and told from the first-person perspective of a 17-year-old farmer who quite harshly rejects a gift of baked potatoes from the daughter of the landlord agent that is the same age. He was told that hanging out with her could get his entire family kicked off the land, so he's really just playing it safe. Well, the girl does not take the rejection well at all, beating one of his hens near to death and having her family's big old rooster attack the one belonging to the boy's family. After a failed attempt to rig the cockfight by feeding his poultry champion some hot sauce, the farmer just kicks the opposing animal dead in frustration. As the two teens grapple with each other while screaming, they fall into a bed of flowers, Korean spice bush to be specific, and the girl calms down, saying she won't narc if the boy stops ignoring her. And then this weird moment of intimacy is broken apart when her mother comes looking for her and the two lovebirds crawl away under the flowers in different directions. Definitely interesting that this story and The Stars share the theme of countryside class-divided romance, even if the tone of both stories is starkly different. Either way, Dongbek is definitely also rather aggressive in showing her emotions, especially after they bubble up after years of keeping them in. Another fun fact, the girl is called Jum-sun in the story, and the same name was given to a maestro of the ring that shows up in Leviathan as an antagonist. It roughly translates to Doti, hence the rather spotty visual design and less than pleasant, seemingly unstable personality. The fact that it's a story taking place in the countryside is also significant. The S-Corp that the League ran away from is described as a mostly backwater agrarian society, and such a description would also fit Korea at the beginning of the 20th century. Decolonization by Japan also brought industrialization and urbanization, and many of the Guino writers created their work to find a way to express this new modernity that they found themselves in, be it by calling back to the traditions of the past or to look to the future, even if it may seem dark. This, in turn, may explain why some of the authors would turn around and declare their support for the imperial overlords. And on that note, let us move on to the third main character of this act. Dongrang, the highly decorated head scientist working at K-Corp, the man always tormented by the shadow of the League, even long after he betrayed them and sold them out to teacups. In real life, Dongrang was the pen name of Yu Chi-jin, another member of Guino, a playwright that focused his work on describing the toil and hardship suffered by common farmers, especially under the occupation. Nowadays, however, he is primarily known for openly supporting the Japanese Empire, remembered as one of the big-name collaborators of the regime, though in reality he changed his tune in 1940, well into the Sino-Japanese War, not by stabbing the League in the back like his fictional counterpart. He also spent several years in repentance after the country's liberation and remained an active playwright for his entire life, eventually passing away in 1974. All in all, a controversial figure in history, certainly a guy giving a vibe of an opportunist willing to do anything he needs to continue doing his craft for its own sake, rather than someone using it as a medium to deliver a message he believed in. Limbus Dongrang is a similarly murky individual, but before we get into him in depth, let's focus on two stories by the real guy that served as an inspiration here. The Cow, which inspired the writing of Dongrang, and The Mud Hut, which served as an inspiration for the hyper-competent secretary Samjo. Also, huge shout-out to the guy on Reddit with the apt name Canto IV Enjoyer for locating English translations of these and putting them up on Google Drive. You have no idea how many headaches you've saved me. We can start with Samjo, because the inspiration behind him is really just a side character in the Mud Hut. He's a young, optimistic, sharp-dressed man living for Japan to find better work, and he promises the family of the main characters that he'll find their son there to deliver a letter, as the boy hasn't written home in quite some time. Unfortunately, it turns out that it's because he joined a liberation movement when working as a construction worker, he was imprisoned and ultimately executed. At the end of the play, a package arrives, sent by Samjo. The bones of the long-lost son, coming back home. The mood of the entire play is rather dour, and probably the most striking line in it is how nobody in Korea is truly free, how the shadow of jail looms over everybody. Limbus Samjo definitely has more lines of dialogue than his literary counterpart, but the elements are there. A man with no background, like a farmer, that worked his way up into a position of a secretary for Dongrang, ultimately betrayed by his optimism and the trust he placed in his boss, as he disintegrated into nothing after jumping into a pool of unrefined tears to prove they are not harmful. I suppose the fact that he keeps explaining stuff like how contracts work to everyone around him is also reminiscent of how in the play the family does not know what the word liberation means at first. They think their son joined a cult of some sorts. But honestly, that's it. Rest in peace, my boy. I hope you return as some sort of fucked up goo monstrosity in a few years. Dongrang himself has, unsurprisingly, a few themes in common with The Cow, authored by his real-life inspiration. The story once again takes us to the Korean countryside in the 30s, focusing on a family of tenant farmers. As is the norm in that time and political climate, they don't even own the soil they're toiling in, they need to rent it. The previous 2 years of harvest were subpar, so they are behind on rent owed to the landlord due to not being able to meet the quotas, but this year is finally good. Which puts them in an even worse position, as it gives a pretext for the agent of the landlord, or as we're going to refer to him going forward, a farm watch, to hound them for payment, even if covering all debts in full would leave them in starvation for the rest of the year. This situation is impacting not just them, but basically the entire village. Their neighbors signed a contract to sell their daughter off to Japan, despite seeing every day how badly it impacted another girl that just came back from a red light district in Seoul. It just so happens that the girl being sold off is also the sweetheart of one of the sons of our protagonist family, so the situation has left him in a sour mood, to say the least. They also have another son who needs money as well, claiming he can use it to sell to Manchuria to earn more money than they could ever gain for farming. At that time it was another Japanese colony, and the empire was pumping a lot of money into resettlement and industrialization. But most importantly, the family also has a single cow. Healthy, with good genes, a real pride of the household, despite not being needed by them to either pull the plow or drive their cart. It is a pure status symbol, rooted in their understanding of the world. The story outright says that the patriarch of the family would rather eat nothing than not feed his cow. And as a status symbol, it is of course valuable. So what will they do? Sell it to save a girl from indentured sex work and let their son happily marry, so his new family can help them survive these hard times. Sell it and invest in their other son's immigration, so he can hopefully lift them out of poverty. Well, it would be great either way, but the choice is not theirs to make. The farm watch confiscates it to settle their debts, despite the cow having much more value than what they owe. They could get it back if they sued, but the legal costs would leave them even worse off. At the very least, they return to zero and can hopefully build up in the following years. If only their older son, distraught over the loss of the love of his life, did not send the landlord's barn aflame, after which he just stood there and let himself get arrested. Nobody gets any positive closure. They were robbed, had no legal recourse against it, and an illegal form of revenge is going to leave them even worse off. Now, some of these elements need to be adjusted to fit Limbus Dongrang, but let me cook here for a second. Like the rest of the league, he is an inventor, but his focus is on healing. As a youngster, he helped animals in his hometown and recalls a yellow calf he nursed back to health with fondness. He did it not for any sort of reward, but due to pride in his own work and the good it can bring, even if on a small scale. He knows that his inventions will not revolutionize the world, especially when compared to the likes of S.E.A, but he is incredibly attached to them nonetheless. His work is the cow. He would rather forsake his own found family than it. A farmer can bear to watch his son die, but not his crops fail, as the theatrical play says. So if Yi San symbolizes moving on with the ideals of the League in heart, and Dong Baek is moving backwards to try and bring back what was lost, then Dong Rang is the idea of preserving a still picture of what it meant to him. A photograph, a still image, a plaque that says Inventor of the Month. Preserving his work was the most important thing to him. He could not bear to lose his cow, even as it did nothing in the field. So, as more and more pressure mounted on the League, he had two choices. He could throw his own inventions into the concept incinerator with the rest of the members to get rid of the problem, to protect the glass window and start anew, or he could sell everyone out to the cops in exchange for protection of his own ideas. As we all know, he chose the latter, only to lose the pride he had in his own work anyway, as being employed by K-Corp meant working with their singularity rather than introducing his own inventions to them. He even employs the use of the window to help extract more tears. All he can do going forward is surround himself with empty awards and compliments for work that was never truly his own. And at the end of his journey, when all of this is laid bare before him, well, at first he quasi-distorts into the gluttony peccatulum, like Cromer did with Lust before him, pretty straightforward. But after that fight he has a vision of the calf he helped, now an adult cow. He helped it for the sake of helping, not for any reward or gratitude. But when it passes him by, it irks him. He did so much, he saved its life, and yet it doesn't even acknowledge his presence. He did expect something in return after all. It's time for him to accept that the praise, rewards and prestige meant more to him than the work itself. He is not haunted by the shadow of the League because of guilt, or because he feels inadequate, but because of the prestige associated with that organization. He did not reserve a desk for Yi San at K-Corp out of fondness or as repentance, but because of how much he would gain if he successfully scouted him. The League, just like the cow in the story, is an empty status symbol to him. And now it's time to accept himself for what he truly is. He kills that cow, his own work, and we see a flashback of him committing fully to the work with the tears, no longer trying to propose his own medicine as an alternative, but using everything he can think of to torment the creepy big eyeball as much as possible. His gluttony for those accolades is endless, and it doesn't matter to him if he gains it for taking the credit for someone else's work. And when he manifests his own ego, also rejecting and name-dropping Carmen Highgirl, he is not a farmer. He is the farm watch. Not someone who creates, but one who takes. Not even for himself, but for his employer. Deep within his soul, Dong Rang is the kind of monster we all know and hate. A middle manager. Before we get back to Yi San, let's swear a bit. First of all, concept incinerators. Introduced in Hell's Chicken, here serving as a key plot point again, as the League uses one to destroy most of their creations, and Dong Baek intends to use it again to wipe out the very idea of the singularity that produces the tears. As it is explained and shown in the world, the incinerator burns up the original creation of something and causes everyone to forget it ever existed, with varying degrees of success depending on the price of the device. However, what I find interesting is that it needs the original idea, not just a copy of it. The guy in Hell's Chicken had to steal and burn the original recipe rather than write down a copy of it and then burn it. Which tells me two things. On a game level, it means Dong Baek's crusade was doomed to fail, as Alphonse confirms at the end that the crying eyeball you find in the K-Corp headquarters is just a child of the main entity, not the real thing. But more interestingly for my nerd ass, it means that we have a hard confirmation that in the city, existence comes before essence. If you found the original, first ever created chair and put it in the incinerator, the idea of a chair would be gone from the world until someone invented it again. It does not operate on Platonic idealism, that there are eternal ideas out there and we are just creating their imperfect material copies. The city runs on hard existentialism. A thing needs to exist before we collectively have the idea of it. And it can be reversed, for a price. It's particularly fascinating because it can mean a few things on a meta level. The endless literary and mystical references in the games may point out that the setting stems in some way from the world we know, that there is a divergence point when everything went to shit, that the lives of the sinners are echoes of stories that already happened and someone in the setting, like the Limbus executives or Faust, is aware of this. But on an immediate story level, it also connects to another event in this canto, Samjo jumping into the vat of tears and dissolving. Dongrang says that the tears don't heal, but rather reverse the state of a person, which is why a subliminal message about being nothing but worms makes people who inject the tears dissolve into bugs rather than heal into their proper form. Again, it's the idea in the head of a person that decides what is the right version of them. There is no pre-existing essence of who they are that the tears return them to. But as Dongrang explains, the tears need refining and dilution, because the pure stuff doesn't take you back to the idea of this is how I, Samjo, look like, but the idea of this is what humanity itself looks like. And poor Samjo dissolves into nothingness. Now, everyone's favorite cowman says that this is because the tears can't actually accomplish what they set out to do and only take someone partway there. But nothing, not even a disfigured body, floats up to the surface. Samjo turns to nothing. The essence of humanity is nothing. Now, remember, the definition of what is and is not human seems to be dictated by the head. Distortions, abnormalities and blood fiends are still human in their eyes, as they can exist within the city and they will not interfere. But an AI like Angela is not. It's a social construct, a loosely agreed on definition at best. Moreover, we heard mentions of the game taking place in the age of humanity, and that it is coming to an end. And that the world has many more things not considered human that were pushed out to the outskirts. But if humanity is nothing, if there is no concrete idea that the tears can reconstruct Samjo into, what exactly are the people we see in the city? And what happened at the year zero, a few hundred years into the past? Will the story take us back there in some way? Well, I hope this pays off in the future, but we'll see. Now, on a slightly less navel-gazing way, let's just do a lightning round of the abnormalities in this canto to see if they tie in narratively in any way. At the very start, the team finds themselves fighting Brazen Bull, as K-Corp drones record the destruction in its wake, as this primo tier production material. The bull is based on an ancient Greek torture device. You stuck a guy inside and lit a fire under it, and the steam from the melting flesh escaped through the bull's nostrils, which combined with the screaming of the tortured guy inside to create an illusion that the bull came to life. The important part is that the first victim of this device, as far as the story goes, was the man who designed it, Perilous. So it's a technological creation that spells its creator own doom, which fits the leak in totality quite well. Next, we have the Fairy Gentleman, fought both as a boss and serving as a source of ego gear for some of the Alliance enemies. It's a jolly guy that appears benevolent, offering you a drink, but it only does that to make you taste better, and its only intent is eating you alive. Fitting both for K-Corp and the Alliance being used by Dongbag for her own goals. Then we have So That No One Will Cry, which also is fought and provides ego gear. It's a wooden doll covered in talismans representing curses. They empower the sinners to a certain level, but too many of them are detrimental. I think the best parallel here might be misfortunes like the need to run from the S-nest, giving the League members motivation to create great things, but as they don't stop, the scientists reach their breaking point. I do feel like I'm missing some cultural context here though. Next we have Drifting Fox, whose ego is used by Dongbag aside from the boss fight in the dungeon. According to the observation logs, it's angry at being shown nothing but fake kindness, given broken umbrellas by others not to shield from the rain, but to make themselves feel better. May be indicative of how Dongbag viewed the Liberation Alliance at large, making pointless gestures that will accomplish nothing in the grand scheme of things. And the ego it gives is called Sun Shower, which is fox rain in Korean, after a folk story that sun showers happen when a cloud that is in love with a fox bursts into tears when seeing it get married to someone else. And as we mentioned, there definitely seem to be some unspoken feelings between Dongbag and Isang. Last but not least, there's the Shock Centipede, which is exactly what it sounds like. It can keep attacking you even after its HP hits 0. The mirror dungeon events involving it have you torture the thing for items, which are either a battery or a defibrillator. So, it's all about inflicting torment on it, so its products can be used as a power source or to heal. Again, it seems pretty reminiscent of K-Corp's methods and just how people in general are used up and spat out by the corporations, including what happened to the League. And last but not least, let us return to Yi-san and the short story The Wings, serving as the main inspiration for his storyline in Limbus. It's a bit difficult to give a proper summary here, because it's less of a story than it is a long metaphor for the author's growing awareness of the political situation of his country. At first only wanting to satisfy his personal curiosity and playfulness, completely oblivious to the fact that his beloved wife is selling her own body to gain money to give to him, then stumbling across the truth and falling sick, then fed sleeping pills by his beloved, while believing it was medicine, and finally finding himself atop a Japanese convenience store, feeling a phantom pain from imaginary wings, symbolizing the dreams and ambitions he used to have. There's also a whole lot of mentions of severe depression symptoms even before he finds out the truth, like sleeping all day and neglecting his personal hygiene. But even with some of the cursory research I did when writing the script, I feel like I could get much more out of the story if I committed to reading real-life Yi-san's biography or something. So, let's take it apart and address the elements separately. The mirror created by Yi-san is called Yonshim, same as the wife of the protagonist in the story. His love is not a woman or the motherland, but invention. The name also changes the characters used in Korean throughout the story. At first, the mirror is used by Yi-san as just an exercise to hone his own mind, a creation without any deeper meaning, a project for the sake of itself. However, within it he meets his reflection, Sang-yi. He speaks more directly and is happy and fulfilled, with beautiful colorful wings sprouting from his back. He is both an opposite to our Yi-san, literally a mirror reflection of him, but also the best version of him, his best impulses given a face and a voice. When the League falls apart, Yi-san is grabbed and taken away by another member, Gubo, who makes both of them join N-Corp as means of gaining protection. In real life, Gubo was the pen name of Park Tae-won, another modernist writer of Guino and Yi-san's best friend. He was primarily concerned with advancing writing as a medium, focusing on the linguistic side of the craft rather than any ideology. Though when the pressure from Japan intensified after the 1940s, he did write some stories that portrayed Japanese people in a positive light. It is worth mentioning that after the country regained independence and later fractured into two, he defected to North Korea alone, leaving his family behind. It's still quite a mystery why he did that, considering his life and writing prior to that did not really indicate that he would be much of a communist. All that we have is the account from his family that before leaving, he simply said, "I'm going to meet my friend Lee Tae-jun," another writer unassociated with Guino. Whatever the case, he became a professor at Pyongyang and lived to the age of 77. Also, fun fact, he's the grandfather of Bong Joon-ho, the director of Parasite. This world is truly small. I think this sudden, unexpected change of allegiance may be the inspiration behind Limbus Gubo suddenly finding a new employer in N-Corp, despite expressing no comments about either their anti-prosthetics philosophy or Herman asking Yi-san to find a way to destroy every mirror reality other than the one the game takes place in. He also gets his ass kicked by Virgilius in Leviathan because bro really thought he can take on a color. In context, it's pretty obvious he was at the ring auction to get his hands on the mirror technology for N-Corp, and their endgame seems to revolve around this idea of cutting off all possibilities but one. But I think Gubo is also cooking something on his own, and maybe he also has another friend in N-Corp that helped him join them. Whatever the case, Gubo leaves Yi-san in a featureless room with the mirror and regularly gives him tranquilizers as supplements, similar to the wife in Wings. Unlike in the short story, Yi-san has his mirror reflection to talk with, and it becomes pretty obvious that Sunny helps him put his own suppressed feelings into words. He doesn't say what Yi-san has to do, only proposes that he should stockpile the supplements and then make his own choice. Either find his bearings and leave, or take them all at once and stay in N-Corp forever. It's also quite interesting that the pills are colored blue. I wonder if the influence of the Matrix had a hand in that artistic choice. Anyway, Yi-san hides the medicine for long enough to find his bearings and just leave through the door. It's interesting that Gubo finds him and tries to argue with him, but doesn't use any force to stop him. At this point, Yi-san is just a deeply depressed guy with nothing to protect himself with, so it's not like confining him by force would be difficult. But it seems that in this world too, Gubo and Yi-san are friends, and you don't beat the shit out of your friend, even if you think you're protecting him from himself. Finally, in the confrontation with Dongrang, Yi-san tries to reason with his compatriot, but unable to reach him, he realized that just like Sang-yi, he has the capacity to grow wings. Even if they are broken, he can fly just for a brief moment. After all, it was his reflection that he was looking at. The mirror shows him something that is possible for him. And throughout the canto we can see that Yi-san acted on those best impulses of his, even when not directly talking to his idealized self, by writing screenplay letters to those dear to him, both in the past and in the future, even if he has not met them yet. By noticing the childlike wonder in the eyes of the League members when they saw the mirror for the first time. He did not create for the sake of creating, to hone his own mind. Yon Sim should be written with characters that mean a bridge between hearts. He did not want to reflect only to see himself in the image, like Dongrang did. He wished to use the surface of the mirror to let him see the others and for them to see him. His wings are made of the images of the people in his life. Anyway, that's done, you get the golden bow, and Alfonso tells everyone to fuck off after wiping their memories, though it doesn't work on Dante. We'll probably see how it pays off in Purgatorio or Paradiso years down the line. We also get to chat with Demian, who becomes more and more obviously inspired by The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupery. He says that using the mirror technology to take something from his reflection is like stealing from him directly. It is, after all, taking away from the possibilities he has. He comments on human greed, unable to just leave the mirror as something for pure enjoyment, drawing parallels between the story that just happened and the tale of the rose in the book, where the prince grows irritated with its words and attitude, ignoring the love it shows him with its actions of spraying its beautiful fragrance around. He also asks Dante to draw him a ship, which is something that the narrator of the story does a few times, each rejected by the little boy for looking wrong, until he finally accepts a drawing of a box with a ship in it. What does that mean for the cutthroat world of the city? I don't know. But I think it's safe to say that Dante will attempt something 3 times before getting it right in Demian's eyes. And that last attempt will involve embracing an idea of what something can be. Like the box that can have the ship inside, rather than what it is on an immediately obvious level. We also get a lot of talk about the stars in this canto, and it's growing increasingly obvious that this symbol will play a big part in the grand scheme of things. Stars both show the way, like for Dante to reach hell, but they also symbolize dreams, with stars in the eyes of the League, or the one barely visible above Dongrang in his fight. And when the boy that joined Stephanette was not looked at by her, he turned into something akin to the star from the picture book as well. Is it because he was not perceived by anyone but himself and could therefore reach the true vision of how he viewed himself? I suppose time will tell. Speaking of time, this is also the first time we see the arm on Dante's clock progress. I've had people tell me that it's probably designed after the Doomsday Clock, which is this huge symbolic timepiece maintained by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists since 1947. It was created by Oppenheimer, and it's basically a really dramatic way of getting the press to listen to scientists for once when they say the political tensions are getting us really close to a man-made disaster in the form of the nukes flying. Maybe the environmental scientists should take note, just make a panorama of a random coastal city and broadcast how they flood it with blood every time a new oil rig is built, but I digress. Between Dongrang's musings about the age of humanity coming to an end in this canto, and Demian's prophetic dream of the city in flames in the previous one, I'm inclined to agree. When Dante's clock strikes midnight, it will be the final day of the city as we know it, of the age of humanity. My question is, what comes after that? Will the clock move forward, or get rewound like the lives of the sinners do when they meet their end? Also, now that I said wings so many times in this script, I started wondering if Yi-sang's writing was an inspiration for why the corporations in the city are called wings. They are striving to do the impossible after all? Whatever the case for all these questions, I don't want to ever again read several articles in a language I don't speak. Let's move on to some good old American English, baby! After a brief beach episode. The gang plays some bitch, volley, burr, and fights some crabs. We get everyone's favorite jobbers from Library of Ruina setting up Mephistopheles to get a boat mode as we're embarking to U-Corp's territories on the high seas. Ishmael freaks out about the team not being ready to deal with Great Lakes bullshit, which will prove prophetic in the next canto. Oh, and we get confirmation that every gameplay mechanic, mirror dungeons, excavations and identities are canonical, while also getting the first Walpurgisnacht event that gives identities from the series' previous entries. We also get a short mention from Honglu about his grandma collecting mutated animals, which will probably become really funny in retrospect once his canto drops. The most important part is really Yi-san smiling and trying to diffuse the tension between Heathcliff and Ishmael, because it melts my heart. Not much to bite into here? Alright, ahoy and on to the high seas. Within the Divine Comedy, Dante and Virgil descend further into hell, into its fourth circle, the place of punishment for the greedy. And here we run into some problems. First of all, greed is not represented within the 7 sins used by Limbus in gameplay, be it because it's already covered by gluttony and the previous canto, because the entire city is guilty of it and focusing solely on avarice for a full chapter would be silly, or because a gacha game denouncing greed would be open to way too many jabs and jeers. I would lean towards the first explanation personally. The punishment in this layer is an eternal duel between the hoarders and the wasteful, both of the groups pushing huge weights with their chests as weapons. And I don't know, it just feels appropriate for the conflict between K-Corp hoarding talent and technology and the Alliance wasting it on suicidal terrorism, though I don't know where the huge boulders would come into play if we follow that train of thought. Whatever is the case, we are skipping greed on this journey. It does not fit into the story of this canto at all. Ishmael even expresses surprise that it's her turn in the Intervallo before the chapter proper, as if she read Divine Comedy and knew she still has more time before having to confront her own trauma. Honestly, it seems that time and again she is the only one that reads the educational pamphlets given to the sinners, so that's not even that unbelievable. I have some reservations on whether or not this skip messes things up for us further down the line, but we'll think about that when we get there. The fifth layer of hell is the stinking, swampy water of the river Styx, where the wrathful are punished. The actively malicious fight each other on the surface of the water, while those who were sullen, which is to say those who still lived guided by anger even if they did not externalize it, are stuck beneath the water of the river, in a black void devoid of any light. And just like Dante Alighieri finds himself on a skiff atop that river, our sinners are sailing on the waters of the sea, or a great lake, guided by Ishmael, who is rapidly losing her grip on the lead she was using to push down all the anger boiling in her. This canto and Ishmael as a character are based on the 1851 novel Moby Dick, or The Whale by Herman Melville. It opens with the narrator asking the audience to call him Ishmael, as if it was not his actual name but rather a pseudonym. In the Bible, Ishmael was the first son of Abraham, born out of wedlock and exiled into the desert. So, in a way, the narrator is calling himself a wanderer without a place, as he tells of his growing restlessness that pushes him towards the ocean, to find a job on a whaling ship. After sharing a bed in the tavern with a Polynesian cannibal named Queequeg, the two men quickly become best friends and together join the service aboard the Pequod, the ship of the one-legged Captain Ahab. In a way, Ishmael is Melville's self-insert, as the author was the son of a New York merchant, the death of whom left the entire family in dire financial straits. This has pushed young Herman to fend for himself, which led to him finding work at the waterfront at age 20, serving on a merchant vessel and later on a whaling ship. As an end result of Melville's life, self-education and travels, the novel's Ishmael is, frankly, the most progressive man of the 19th century, open-minded and willing to not just exist next to people of different creeds and beliefs, but to take part in their traditions, as long as they do no harm to others. In an early chapter of the book, Ishmael gladly joins Queequeg in a prayer to a pagan idol, not considering it any kind of heresy at all. And then he turns to the proverbial camera and spends several pages telling the audience how hunting whales is awesome, because we all need candles and oils, not just for lamps, but to oil machinery and anoint kings as well. Man against beast, a hunter carving a place for himself in the world. Surely it's God's will that we do so. And then he gets into obscene detail discussing the anatomy of whales, each step of how to hunt and process a whale, and every other detail that makes the book less of a novel with an arc of a story, and more of a fictional equivalent of a documentary about some blue-collar job that you never thought too deeply about. As I said, 19th century. The story in Limbus serves as a sequel to the book in a way, taking place after the events from the novel. So let's summarize it really quickly. Ishmael and Queequeg join the crew of a ship named Pequod to hunt whales. Its captain Ahab is obsessed with one whale in particular, a white one called Moby Dick, that took his leg some years past. As the ship ventures forth, Ahab's obsession takes more and more of a hold, as he even ignores the plea of another ship's captain to find his lost son. And all the signs in heaven and earth tell the crew that this chase is a bad idea. At one point, Queequeg falls sick and feels that the day of his death is close, so he asks the ship's carpenter to make him a coffin. Finally, Ahab finds the white whale, gives chase to it over the course of 3 days, and the Leviathan promptly destroys the Pequod and kills everyone except for Ishmael, who floats atop the water, clinging to Queequeg's coffin that was refitted into a lifeboat. We'll discuss each character in detail when they appear in Limbus, so first, let's get back into the city. The Great Lake is not a singular body of water, but rather a patchwork quilt of different zones, each with its own laws and dangers. Not much to do with how the sea is portrayed in Moby Dick when taken literally, but sailors were a very superstitious kind of people due to how dangerous the trade was, and the lows and waves of the city's sea can be seen as a way of making all those beliefs real within the story. Similarly, whales are dramatized not as the real-life's big ol' mammals, but rather as creatures that can parasitize on humans and turn them into mermaids, both of which are hunted and processed into countless commodities in the city. Even with the city's immensely powerful technology, hunting whales is exceptionally dangerous, just as it was in the times of Melville. And despite that risk, the trade is so profitable that it will never run out of bodies to fuel itself. The sinners even have to use a small boat to reach other places in this canto, just like the whalers had to descend in smaller vessels to hunt their marks before rowing their massive bodies back to the main ship. The ports of U-Corp require the whaling trade and thrive on it. In particular, the awl is important for the production of the corporation's singularity technology, the tuning forks that allow for things like ships to merge with each other seamlessly. This mirrors reality of times when Moby Dick was penned. A large part of the book's message is the juxtaposition of how important and valuable the spoils of the hunt are, and how death and injury loom over every single step of the process. On a bit of a meta level, it's also interesting how the singularity is a repurposed use of an alien terrifying power of the whales to turn their victims into an extension of themselves, finding much more versatile use when applied to man-made technology. Just like the fattened blubber of real whales meant to keep them warm and buoyant has many more applications than the animals could never think of, like producing a smokeless flame in lamps or greasing the gears of a factory machinery. Ishmael, as seen in the beginning of this canto, is not the wide-eyed idealist that her novel counterpart was. She is someone that experienced the destruction of Pequod and death of her friends, embittered and single-mindedly pushing towards her goal. She's snappy, extremely prone to resolving conflicts with aggression, and unwilling to listen to any insight from other sinners, including Dante, due to viewing herself as the only one with necessary experience to let them survive the journey. In a way, she's more Ahab than Ishmael, and we'll examine that in detail when we meet the captain, because of course she didn't die when the Pequod was sunk. The team arrives at a port managed by U-Corp to meet with their recon team, but they need to deal with the pirates that kidnapped them first. They are a greedy bunch, requesting more and more ransom until they suck their mark dry, after which they just unceremoniously kill the kidnappee. The pirates are a syndicate led by Captain Hook, inspired by the antagonist from the 1904 theatrical play Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. But Hook is too busy getting plastered, so the party deals with his first mate, Smee. In the play, Mr. Smee is the rare, nice, caring pirate, the only one in the crew that stabs and kills people without malice in his heart. When the pirates kidnap the children that serve as the protagonists of the story, all of them love Smee to bits, despite him believing that they must be scared of him. By comparison, Limbus Smee is definitely less nice, but she is also not malicious by the city's standards, it's all just business. Though she definitely has the wrong idea about being feared, just like the literary Smee. Either way, the party beats the daylight out of her. She says that the syndicate is protected by the middle, so they can't kill her. Ishmael tries it anyway, but Dante jumps between Smee and the harpoon, baffling pretty much everyone. Good metaphor for how Ishi's one-track mind is gonna get everyone killed at some point if it goes on. The team rescues Pilot, the only remaining member of the recon squad, who was spared because his team leader slipped him her ID, making him look like the most important person from that group, despite him being just a naive rookie. In other words, he is a parallel to how Ishmael was the only one to survive from the Pequod, despite being a rookie to the whole whaling trade herself. She doesn't take it well. But hey, at least now we know that Salt survived Canto IV and get some intel on where the Lobotomy Corp branch is, how they got caught by a big brother of the middle, and how even he had to run when one of the great calamities showed up. Yeah, I'm sure it's nothing. On the way to the LobCorp branch, the sinners also come across a ghost ship with all the people who partied on board turned into mermaids. Not really something that shows up in the novel, aside from maybe the several mentions of the Pequod meeting other manned ships in exchange for information. I suppose it's just a way to show the audience, once again, how dangerous and unpredictable the lake is. This is probably a good spot to take a moment and discuss the whale. The titular Moby Dick is white, old and gigantic. Its hide is too thick to be pierced by any harpoon, several of them are even sticking out of its body. Its forehead is wrinkled in a pattern that reminds Ishmael of the hieroglyphs. It travels across all of the world's oceans in solitude. It claimed many more victims than just Ahab's leg. Even with Ishmael's near constant yapping about each and every detail regarding the whales, there is something about Moby Dick that does not conform to that knowledge, something unknowable and alien. But even with all that, it's just an animal. What elevates it above being just another quarry is Ahab's obsession with it, making it the object of his rage against the imperfection of the world, a symbol of all the evil that can befall a person. To penetrate that impenetrable hide, to kill the immortal Leviathan, to take revenge for his lost limb, for Ahab, the hunt is a way of rebellion against the nature of the world itself. In Limbus, the pallid whale is similarly just a whale, another specimen of a dangerous species hunted for industrial use, but it's also one of the 5 calamities. Much larger, unique, disregarding the laws of the lakes and traveling between them. But even with all these traits, it is definitely not responsible for the nature of the city and all the evil that happens within it. The platform that served as LobCorp's branch is covered in a thin, pale membrane of flesh, and we are promptly informed that's what the pallid whale does. It doesn't just turn people into mermaids, it claims everything as its own, turning even structures into a part of itself, while the other whales can seemingly only do that to people. Which is interesting when we consider the previous Cantos singularity and dimension of the true definition of humanity. Surprisingly enough, whales making people into part of themselves are a part of the novel. Let my goblin friend tell you all about it. Come on.
Squeeze. 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 All the morning long I squeezed that sperm till I myself almost melted in it. I squeezed that sperm till a strange sort of insanity came over me, and I found myself unwittingly squeezing my co-laborers' hands in it, mistaking their hands for the gentle globules. Such an abounding, affectionate, friendly, loving feeling did this advocation beget, that at last, when I was continually squeezing their hands, and looking up into their eyes sentimentally, as much as to say, "Oh dear, my fellow human beings, why should we longer cherish any social accrepities, or know the slightest ills, humor, or envy? Come, let us squeeze our hands all around. Nay, let us all squeeze ourselves into each other. Let us squeeze ourselves universally into the very milk and sperm of kindness."
Okay, I just wanted to have a pretext to put that quote in this video. But still, I think it's interesting that this quite infamous section of the book could be the inspiration for how the whale oil and resonance forks work. Either way, we meet Rim here, another member of the League of Nine, based on the poet Kim Kirim. His presence is announced by the ill-fitting presence of a butterfly in the middle of the lake, and the poet's most well-known work is a short poem titled The Sea and the Butterfly. It's about the titular insect mistaking the water for a blue field, unable to be afraid of it because it cannot know of the depths below the surface. Dipping into the water and flying away, sad that the field isn't blooming as it should. The poem is commonly read as being a description of a delicate beauty being destroyed by the contemporary colonial reality of Korea. Incidentally, real-life Yi-san died 2 years before the publishing of this poem, and Kim Kirim was considered a close friend of his. Also, the real-life poet lived in the north of the country during the colonial period, traveled south, and then got abducted back during the Korean War, with no information on what happened to him after that, or even the exact date of his death. If N-Corp will continue to serve as a parallel for real-life North Korea, like it did for Gubo, Rim may be one of the casualties when conflict inevitably breaks out between all the factions. This possibility also paints the talk between Herman and Sonia in Canto II in an interesting light, now that I think about it. Rim just confirms that he's working with Demian, that the group as a whole is content with observing the situation and not going after the golden balls themselves, and then we get invaded by the middle because Heathcliff stole some fucking hair coupons. Big Brother Ricardo doesn't seem to be a reference to any real-life figure or work of literature. He's just here to kick your ass, imply more world building as he mentions a great sister that is his superior, and then serve as a contrast when we meet the Limbus version of Queequeg. The party is saved by the Indigo Elder, a color fixer that was chilling on a skiff and noticed the commotion. The Elder became a color after hunting another great calamity, the Marlin whale, which leads to the conclusion that he is based on the character of Santiago from The Old Man and the Sea, a 1952 novella by Ernest Hemingway. Why would a short story about some old fisherman be the basis for a color fixer, you ask? Because Santiago fucking hunts down a marlin larger than the boat he was on, harpoons a shark that tries to eat it, then ties a goddamn knife to an oar to stab 3 more sharks and then club 2 others over the head. He ultimately fails and just ends up with a huge skeleton of a fish tied to his skiff, but you gotta admit, that's gangster as fuck. The Limbus version of the Fish Slayer decides to join the sinners in the hunt for the pallid whale, and also mentions that he wishes to test himself, to reach beyond the outskirts and go past the edge of human understanding. He says that beyond even that border there are stars, once again used as a metaphor for the miraculous, it seems. Now that I think about it, it's quite interesting how within Limbus there is a constant talk of stars outside of the city, but massive menaces to society are also called stars of the city. And we know that in Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, the stars of the night sky make up Paradiso, the heavens. Definitely something to look out for in future chapters. And so the party sails straight into the gaping maw of the pallid whale, where it turns out that the crew of the Pequod still lives, surviving in the belly of the beast and fighting off the effects of pallidification with intense faith in Captain Ahab. So let's get to breaking down the characters. Starbuck is the first mate of the Pequod, second in command after Captain Ahab. In the novel, he is a devout Quaker and just wants to make sure the crew is safe and successful. As one would expect, this leads to him clashing against his captain and his monomaniacal quest of revenge several times. At one point, Starbuck even contemplates shooting Ahab dead, but stops himself from doing it, as murder would be against his principles. He decides to follow his captain to the end, though to be fair to him, he does try to appeal to Ahab's better nature throughout the voyage. First, he attempts to argue that it's heretical to consider a simple beast as the source of all evil in the world, then he just pleads with Ahab and reminds him of his own family back home. Of course, none of this works. In Limbus, Starbuck is much less of a presence as a character, but he still is a kind man intent on returning home with the crew, resigned to follow Ahab and place his trust in her plan to get out of the belly of the whale. Ishmael mentions that the two of them butted heads often, but we never see it happen in any flashback, unfortunately. Pip is a small child that has no place working on a ship. In Moby Dick, he was a black cabin boy and in one of the hunts for regular whales, replaces a sick oarsman despite being way too physically weak to pull his weight. In panic, he jumps into the water and the harpoon's rope wraps around his neck, forcing the boat's crew to cut the whale loose to save him. He then gets told by Stab, Pequod's second mate leading that whaling boat, that the whale's carcass is worth several times more than what Pip would be worth at the slave market. Remember, this book came out before the American Civil War. So he better not jump into the water again, or they're leaving him behind. But of course, Pip is a panicking child, so he does do it again. And they do leave him behind, for hours, before going back to save him because even fucking Ahab considers this unacceptable. Unfortunately, this experience leaves Pip utterly mentally broken. He doesn't even consider himself Pip anymore, saying that the poor boy drowned. Ahab sympathizes with the child and takes him under his wing. In Limbus, Pip is also a child that loses his mind, though surprisingly enough, I feel like his circumstances feel much less harsh than in the novel. In the book, Stab was a chain-smoking and seemingly jovial man, always smiling, but as the previously described incident shows, he was also the kind of an asshole that was ready to leave a child to die for profit, after he assigned said child to a position he had no place in. In Limbus, Stab is outwardly abrasive, but in a moment of crisis, he saves Pip and gets bitten by a mermaid himself, starting to slowly turn into one. Pip's mind in Limbus is broken by the combination of guilt and Ahab gaslighting the crew, insisting that Stab left the Pequod safely and will welcome them back, right after they shoved his transforming body into the brig to use him as a compass to bring them to the pallid whale. In a way, this version of Ahab also takes Pip under her wing, as the boy is willing to do her bidding, no matter how morally questionable, with a bright smile on his face. Queequeg we already discussed a bit before. In the novel, he is a Polynesian harpooner, a prince of a fictional island traveling the world, and Ishmael's best friend, if you consider a declaration made that the both of them are married as just friendship, like the novel Ishmael does. His body is covered in tattoos and he speaks in broken, incomplete sentences due to not speaking English very well, just like yours truly, A. This makes him initially seem intimidating, but after getting to know him a bit better, it becomes incredibly obvious that he is a kind and patient man. He is also an incredibly good harpooner, getting hired on the spot after showing his skills. Oh, and Queequeg also almost certainly ate another human being at some point, because it's not that much of a big deal in his culture. In Limbus, Queequeg is a former big sister of the Middle, escaping her past. The tattoos covering her body are there because of her affiliation. Her speech patterns are broken and slurred because she basically underwent lobotomy to get rid of the parts of her psyche affected by her former gang. Rather than being a savage in the understanding of a 19th century writer, she is one because of the brutality she committed in her past. Just look at how Ricardo is willing to commit a massacre for a few hair coupons, and you will see both who Queequeg was before joining the Pequod and what she is desperately trying to run away from. She even confirms that she feels deep shame, not just because of what she did, but the glee she took in those acts. And so she cuts into her tattoos to rid her skin of them. More importantly, she is also Ishmael's best friend, and it's not difficult to see that bond in a romantic light, same as in the novel. The red-headed sinner's dream when aboard the ship was to live a quiet life together with the harpooner, no matter what they did day to day, as long as they were together. It was that loss that drove Ishmael into a maniacal quest for revenge, just like Ahab losing his leg made him swear vengeance upon the white whale. Similarly as in the novel, ropes are used as a symbol of connections, both positive and negative. In Moby Dick, we have a chapter where Ishmael and Queequeg are tied with one like Siamese twins, and at the very end it's a rope tying around Ahab's neck that kills him, dragged underwater by the white whale. In Limbus, we have a memory of Ishmael being stranded inside a whale after her safety rope snaps, realizing how she's going to literally and symbolically dissolve into nothing without that connection, only to be saved by Queequeg throwing her another line. And of course, the hairband she wears since the very beginning of the game is made from rope woven by her best friend. To get to the final book immigrant in the form of Captain Ahab, first we need to discuss where we find the Limbus version of that character, in the belly of the whale. This draws a parallel to the biblical story of Jonah, which of course is also mentioned in Moby Dick in the form of a sermon given to the sailors near the start of the book. The abridged version of it goes as follows. God tells Jonah to go to a city and tell them that Big G is angry, and the prophet would rather run away from that order and sail away somewhere where God's power would not reach him. The ship is caught in a storm, Jonah admits it's his fault and he's thrown overboard, after which the sea calms immediately. Our plucky protagonist then gets swallowed by a huge fish and when inside its belly, prays for 3 days to ask forgiveness. And he receives it. The fish vomits Jonah out, and he goes on to do as he was told to do by God. It's a story about forgiveness and second chances, and due to it being quoted early into the book, it casts a shadow onto all of the events of Moby Dick. Because it's not just that Ahab goes on a doomed quest to slay the white whale and gets everyone killed in the process. He is moved by the loyalty of his crew, he finds beauty in nature, he grows close with Pip when the boy helps him walk, he looks deep into Starbuck's eye and is reminded of a wife and child he left behind. A captain of another ship called Rachel pleads with him to help him find a young son that was lost on the sea when they tried to harpoon the white whale themselves. And Ahab swats each and every one of these chances to turn back away. He is not devoid of humanity, and yet he puts his blind obsession over anything else, of his own conscious choice. Limbus Ahab is not that. She is somewhat chill in the flashback that we see when Ishmael signs up to serve on the Pequod, but everything else that we see of her shows nothing but pure distilled rage against the whale, with not even a sliver of any other emotion. She is the personification of the sin of wrath as portrayed in the Inferno, first stuck in a seemingly endless fight atop the surface of the Great Lake, now stewing in her hatred below its surface, plotting and scheming to find a way to strike at the pallid whale's heart. No, the second chance is not something given to her, she has lost that privilege long ago. But it is given to Ishmael, swaying her from the path of following in Ahab's footsteps. And it is also given in turn to Dante, to prove that they are a better captain than before, that they can guide the sinners to a better fate than death. Ishmael's case is pretty straightforward, as the story basically spells out how she acts more and more like Ahab. I also love how their silhouettes are very similar too, and Starbuck even comments that Ishmael used to keep her hair short because keeping it long would be impractical, implying that she stopped caring about herself in a way, and that maybe Ahab was similar to her before losing her leg. We do love thematic parallels implying a larger story in this house. Though a less dire reading is also possible, that she grew it out because Queequeg once said how she loves that Ishi's hair is the color of a sunset. As for Dante, at the beginning of the game they were barely recognized as an authority in the group, considered barely useful due to not being a fighter and only a healer. But after many trials and tribulations, in Canto V we finally get to see Dante directly reach Ishmael and give her a direction other than the one she followed throughout the entire chapter. A hope for a better tomorrow, that even with all of her dreams dead, they can find a new destination together. A redemption of sorts. And you know, there is definitely something to be said about Dante having 12 sinner followers, that they heal them by suffering in their stead, that they are willing to stand in front of Ishmael's harpoon several times in this canto to protect her from her own actions. We will see how the story pans out in the future, but so far all the signs are pointing to Clockhead being based not just on the protagonist of the Divine Comedy, but on the Christian version of Jesus as well. Fun fact: did you know that in Asian art, halos around the heads of holy people are sometimes portrayed as a crown of flames? I suppose that's fitting, considering that Ain from Lobcore basically ends up being the Old Testament god. Does that mean Roland and Argella in Ruina are based on their Zoroastrian dualism? No. I suppose the belief in two opposing forces of good and evil fighting over a person's soul would be more fitting to the voice of Carmen causing distortions and her directly confirming in Leviathan that Ain is opposed to her methods. And their religion is based on the teachings of Zarathustra, whose name was used by Nietzsche in his writings. The fucking chickens! Oh, the people who awaken ego are the goddamn Ubermenschen. Let's take a few steps back here so I can put this into words. When reading through this canto, my attention was captured by Ahab's monologue on her motivations. I'm not qualified to voice a girl boss, so let's have a professional do it.
I am the only one who matters. What matters is that I have declared this beast evil, and that is my commandment, my belief, my religion, and my creed. When I perish, this world shall perish as well. So my very life, my very existence itself, is then the world, and I have deemed it so. No one will be the helmsman of my life but myself. No one shall live my life in my stead. What do you, all of you, believe in? Tell me, is your belief unbreakable? Is it absolute? My beliefs are absolute. My definitions of good and evil are clear-cut. Thus my beliefs are unclouded, unassailable, because I have made it so. That is why I will never be broken. That is why I stand tall, unshakable, as a missionary of my own faith. I have blessed you with my absolute definitions of good and evil, so that you may live your life with unhesitating, unwavering tenacity.
Egotistical, sure, and the book Ahab similarly declares that just like there is one god that rules the world, there is one Ahab that rules the Pequod. In a way, Moby Dick is partially a criticism of this attitude, as it is Ahab's monomania and utter belief in his own power that dooms tens of people to die. But consider that Limbus Ahab awakens her ego without even as much as a single line dedicated to refuting the voice. How her utmost convictions bring her to that pinnacle of personal power that very few in this setting can achieve. In Leviathan, specifically in one of the later chapters that sadly only have an unofficial machine translation, we get a first-person perspective from Virgilius, who just lost everyone that he cares for and is on the verge of distorting. He gets to chat with Carmen, who urges him to give in to despair and be true to himself. But Red Gaze insists that he will move on, despite the despair, and awakens his ego. Now, let's compare and contrast to Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy. He declares that God is dead. In other words, the structure that gives people's life order and meaning is gone. This fits how distortions start. In this video we discussed a man's belief system completely crumbling because he lost his chicken recipe. He then warns of how fighting monsters can turn you into one, how the abyss stares back. This is dramatized as distortion in the city, and we have more than plenty of examples of people turning into the object of their hate in Ruina. Finally, he postulated the possibility for people to overcome that despair and take control of their life, to live in accordance with their own values. A person that can achieve that, he dubbed an Ubermensch. And in this very video, we discussed 3 such cases. Dong Bek manifested hers when she declared she will walk her own heart-wrenching path, understood by no one. Dong Rang turns into Farmwatch when he fully accepts that he never cared for anything but himself. And finally we have Ahab, whose conviction in her own moral compass was so strong, she didn't even get a chance to distort. Back in Library of Ruina, Philip partially manifested ego when he accepted that he will need to carry the pain for his fallen companions, only to distort one's doubts about his relationship with them is sown. And Xiao outright says, before becoming fire itself, that she cannot see the path before her, but she trusts herself to find the correct road ahead sooner or later. The pattern fits. Nietzsche, the correct non-Nazi take on Nietzsche, is at the core of the Project Moon power system, and you have no idea how happy it makes the little philosophy graduate in my heart. Also, I have no idea what the fuck it is going to mean for anyone with the Mark of Cain, considering it was the metaphor for an overman in Endymion, but we'll get there when we get there. Though, of course, this does not mean any of this is a good thing within the fiction of Limbus. Nietzsche's whole deal was being very dismissive of the common understanding of morality. It also doesn't make you invincible, because we personally kick the shit out of all of these people in both games, and it's not a permanent thing, as Philip's case in Ruina shows. In Limbus, rather than kill Ahab and let her ideas remain unchallenged, Dante directs Ishmael to strike at the whale's heart. Poor old Captain is so lost after that, it's a wonder she doesn't distort right then and there. Though I suppose that Herman coming in after the credits to give her a job to hunt potentially infinite pilot whales is some sort of stability. Interesting how one chapter ago she wanted to destroy all mirror realities, and now she offers to use them to give Ahab what she wants. Gaslight to gaslight communication. Okay, let's wrap up the remaining details so I can go to bed. Ahab promises the Pequod crew payment in gold coins when they leave the belly of the beast. In the book, Ahab nails a golden doubloon to the mast and promises it to the first person that spots the white whale on their voyage. After awakening Ego, Ahab loses her captain's hat. In the book, it's snatched away by a bird as one of many signs that the Pequod should turn back. In the book, the captain makes a new harpoon to strike Moby Dick down, tempered in the blood of all the harpooneers. It doesn't work. In Limbus, the ego is not just a part of Ahab, but makes her subordinates a part of itself. It works on the same rules as palidification, and the book also talks about everyone becoming one of mind at the peak of Ahab's delusion. It's also really interesting how I was just talking about Nietzsche, talking about the risk of becoming what you hate, and here's awakened Ahab acting exactly like the pallid whale does. And it's not a distortion. Guess you can be true to yourself even when blind to the irony of it all. Quick talks about loving Ishmael's hair because it's the color of the sun, and the new daybreak is the optimistic note at which the story ends. This is not part of the book, but we need to remember the obvious here. The sun is a star. It's once again used symbolically as hope, a distant dream, something unreachable yet moving us forward. The abnormalities encountered in the dungeon are Ambling Pearl, slowly corroding the sinners over time with its muck and protecting the pearl inside it, being a parallel to dangers and lucrativeness of whale hunting. Skin Prophet, writing undecipherable prophecies in its book, which may be in line with how in the book Ahab is told his future by the harpooner Fedala, though none of these elements exist in Limbus. And finally, the dream-devouring Silt Current. The ego attack derived from it is called Blind Obsession, so that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Let's close on my favorite scene in the entire canto. Ishmael slowly getting palidified as she loses any hope in the future, consumed by her obsession to strike Ahab down. In a way, even as an object of hatred, Ahab is the single constant of her life. All the other crew members get turned into pale mush and become part of their captain following the same logic. And I just love it so much that what saves her is not a grand speech or a flashback or anything like that, but Heathcliff just nonchalantly pulling her out and reminding her that there are others in her life, even if she joined the company as means towards an end. That despite how suffocating, all-encompassing Ahab's presence has been in her mind, the world is so much larger and more complex than just one old woman being the personification of everything wrong with it. And sometimes it takes that one coworker you can't stand showing you kindness to see that. Never let anyone lay claim to your soul. There are many more colors within it than just the pale whiteness. The cracks in you that it seeped through are just a part of who you are, not the totality of it. And in the end, nobody other than yourself can define you. Alright, everyone get off the bus, we're stopping here for now. I'll keep myself 2 cantos behind for the sake of my sanity, so I'll see you in a year to discuss some withering heroics. Huge thanks to the fellow tubers, Grimbles Grumbles and Georgie Games, for voicing over a part of Moby Dick and the Ahab monologue respectively. Please give a standing ovation to the sponsors of this book tour, now visible on the screen. Special thanks go to Ash, who freshly joined the fray. Next video is gonna be on something. A specific upcoming game, if I like the review code, a general topic, if not. I'll see you in January, or maybe February. We'll see how it goes. Cheerio.